Welcome back to another part in my Create a Quick Great Tone series. So I receive a lot of questions on my YouTube channel. Sometimes they're about topics I've covered before in other videos, and today's not going to be any different, but I wanted to do a very quicker, more concise version of that longer form video. I will have the link below to the video in question, and you might be saying, well, what question is this that you've been asked? And the question I've been asked recently is, where is the best place to place a volume pedal in the signal chain? Now, as is often the case, there is no one right answer. It's really going to be dependent on what the person's desired results are. So today I'm going to show you very quickly the things I think about when deciding where to place my volume pedal. Without further ado, let's head over. I'm going to be in Helix Native today. Okay, so here we are over in Helix Native. Very basic little preset. I have a Brit Trem Norm amp with a 412 Greenback 25. I have a pretty wet delay and reverb on for good reason because I want to illustrate something afterwards. This is what this sounds like. All right, nice little tone, lots of wet reverb and delay on that. And you'll notice I also have a little volume pedal here. Since I'm working in Helix Native, I'm gonna have to do this manually. My Helix is not available today, so I have no choice but to do it here. So basically our choices are this. We could have our volume pedal at the start of a chain. We could also have other effects before it or after it. Keep in mind that any volume change you make is going to affect the following blocks in the chain. So if we have non-linear blocks, meaning blocks that tones are going to be affected by how much volume is hitting them, whatever volume change we make before it with a volume block is going to affect it. So if we're really happy with the way a certain block sounds and we know that putting less volume into it is going to change that, we have to keep that in mind, much like the position I'm in now before the amp, which we'll talk about in a minute. But we could also slide that after the amp. Now, a lot of people seem to not think that's going to make any difference, but it's going to make a huge difference. We'll discuss that in just a second. And another option would be putting it after the effects. But obviously, we could also put it between the effects, right? So what's going to happen when we use these different positionings? Well, if we're before the amp, what you're going to notice is if I play this tone as is, and I'm going to actually, for this, take the delay and reverb off. I have a certain level of overdrive. Now, if I lessen the amount of volume going into that amp, that's going to be very similar to rolling our volume knob back on the guitar. And most guitar players realize that when you do that, the sound cleans up because you're not hitting the front end of the amp as hard. I have my guitar volume on full. So we don't get so much of a volume drop, or we might get a little bit, but we're actually cleaning the amp up. So if that's your desired result, if you want to have some sort of control over maybe boosting a little more gain into your amp, you could possibly set this up at, 60 and then have the ability to crank it up when we want a little more break up out of our amp. So what happens if we just simply move that after the amp? Well, now when we bring our volume down, we just get a lower volume of that same kind of amp setting or drive setting. We don't lose any overdrive anymore because we're still hitting the front of that amp with the same amount of signal. So I can bring this way down. I'm going to get a much quieter volume, but I'm going to have the same tone. We're just hearing that same tone with the same amount of overdrive distortion, just at a lower volume. Now, if we did have our effects on here, what would happen is, if I was to use my volume pedal to lower this down, it's going to fade out or lower the volume of the amp, right? So I could be sustaining a chord, but you'll notice that the reverb and the delay continue on after the fact. Whereas just the sound of the amp goes down. Now I could also move it between there and say, I just want to get rid of the delay and the amp sound, but I want the reverb to keep going. You'll hear the reverb tail keeps going. If I did that with both, you'll see that even after I'm at the 0 position, I still get my delay and my reverb. Now, if we put it right at the end of the chain, this is going to take everything out and make it dead silent at the end if I do the same thing. Right? We lose all of our reverb, all of our delay. It's just gone. It just cuts it out altogether. So really, there's our options. Right now, this is a simple little preset. Obviously, depending on what else we have in there, we have to keep in mind that putting this before a drive pedal, it's going to hit that drive pedal harder or softer. It's going to affect the tone of that drive pedal. If we have a compressor anywhere in our chain, if I had a compressor at the end, like I oftentimes do in my presets, any change in the amount of volume going into that compressor is going to change how that compressor reacts. So we really have to keep those things in mind. So is there a right or wrong way to do this? Well, definitely not. It really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you want to control the amount of saturation or overdrive your amp is giving, then put it before your amp or your overdrive pedal and be able to control how much input we're hitting, much in the way we would use our volume knob on our guitar. If we just want to control the volume level of our amp to turn it up and down without affecting its tone, make sure that volume pedal is after the amp and maybe before some of the effects if you want those effects to continue on like I showed today with the delay and reverb. And if you want the ability to just control the entire preset and have everything cut off at, let's say, the end of a song, no delay and reverb trails, we could put it at the end of our signal chain and we can bring everything down with a simple foot control. And again, keeping in mind the compression is another important one. Whatever we send into the compressor is really going to affect how that compressor reacts. So putting a volume pedal before it and sending less signal into it may almost negate what the compressor is doing because we're not hitting it with as much level. So I hope that really quick look at this does answer a lot of folks' questions. I've been getting a ton of questions about this lately, so I figured I would do another short video. A link is below in the description if you want to watch the longer video on this, where I do talk about a few other little things that can maybe help you get some new ideas for using your volume pedal. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please like the video, share it with anybody who you think would get some use or enjoyment out of watching it. And also please subscribe to my channel and hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new content out. I'll be back really soon with some more. Thank you guys again so much for sharing your time with me. Ciao for now.